Okay, tonight we're going to do a special talk on Hanukkah. Even though I've covered it in the past, today we're going to cover it slightly on a different angle. It's very interesting how Hanukkah has more days than any other holiday. Even the holidays that are mentioned in Torah, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, in Eretz Israel at least, you don't have any holiday that's more than 7 days. Here, outside of Israel, in Chutz La'aretz, we have that additional 8th day, for example, on Pesach and in Sukkot, just because of the safek, the doubt that existed in the calendar as to when exactly the holiday began. Nonetheless, as far as the total number of days in a particular holiday, Hanukkah has the most. Hanukkah, as you know, is by rabbinic decree. It was instituted during the Second Temple era. It's not a holiday that is written in the Torah. Nevertheless, it's a very special holiday. It's something that is celebrated just about for every Jew. And it's interesting because there are many laws, many customs that are not observed, unfortunately, by all Jews. Hanukkah, for some reason, has become very popular, and it has more days. So one of the questions that I'm going to ask and talk about is, what's so special about this holiday that we celebrate it for 8 days? Question number 2 is, why is there such an emphasis on the lights, on the candles, on the olive oil? What is so unique about that? Even though we know that the miracle, or one of the miracles, involves oil, nevertheless, there's so much emphasis on the light that there are numerous halachot in the Shulchan Aruch that were written on these lights, on these nerot, on how long they need to last, where you have to place them, and so forth. So it's interesting how much of an emphasis there is in this particular detail of the lights. And number 3 is a question that always bothered me. How, for those of you who know a little bit of the story, how the Maccabim, the Hashmonaim, fought the wars, the battles against the Greeks, and eventually they were victorious. Why is it that only a very select number of people, of individuals, decided to fight, to challenge the Greeks? Why did everybody think of the same idea? I mean, you can obviously say that they felt they didn't have a chance. Well, if that's the case, then why did the Hashmonaim, the Maccabim, did feel that they had a chance? Why only the very few, who we know, of course, were miraculously saved and defeated the Greeks in a miraculous way, where the few defeated the many? How come they followed the idea? What gave them the courage, more than anyone else, to go out against the Greeks? Just a little bit of background. We're talking about the era, the time in history of the Second Temple, somewhere in the middle of the Second Temple era, where the Greeks have pretty much control over the Middle East. After the Greeks, you know who took over, right? The Romans took over. But during this time, the Greeks are in control. Greeks, Romans, Persians, they all have their culture, their civilization, what they try to disseminate and teach, and so forth. The Greeks, of course, wanted to introduce their culture, their philosophy, their ideas. They were a philosophical nation, philosophical race, and they wanted to get their ideas across. And of course, they did not want anybody else's idea if it went contrary to their beliefs and their ideas. One way to subjugate a land and a people is by giving them your ideas, allowing them to believe in what you believe. In a sense, you become one. And that was part of their strategy. And in order to achieve that, they had to stamp out, issue decrees against some of the mitzvot, in particular some of the mitzvot that was in the way, that caused problems for them. One of them being the Shabbat, the study of the Torah, our calendar, the Brit Milah, and other services in the temple. This was, of course, a problem for them, and they attempted to stamp it out. There were always Jews, Baruch Hashem, that the Msirut Nefesh, with utmost sacrifice, defied their decrees. Many were caught, many were killed. But their idea was not to murder Jews, necessarily, even though they did. Their idea was simply to take over, using their philosophy, and trying to control the Jewish neshama, the Jewish soul, the Jewish spirit, the Jewish mind. And of course, this was a very big danger to the Jewish nation. As the rabbis tell us, and there is also a mitzvah in the Torah, to be very careful on how we deal with the Mesitu Mediach. Mesitu Mediach is one who tries to mislead another Jew. You have a Jew that tries to mislead another Jew to take him off the derech, to have him join another cult, another religion. That Mesitu Mediach is very dangerous. Why is it so dangerous? Rabbis tell us that one who's Mesitu Mediach, mislead another Jew, is worse than one who kills him. Why? Because one who murders another Jew killed him in this physical world. The Mesitu Mediach, the one who misleads another Jew, has basically harmed that other Jew in this world and in the Olam Haba, the world to come. Because if a Jew, Chas v'Shalom, God forbid, is misled and does not fulfill his obligation, does not comply with the mitzvot, does not fulfill his mission in this world, then he has lost a great deal. He's lost an entire lifetime, a chance, an opportunity to be a servant of Hashem, to fulfill the Torah and mitzvot, and to have Hashem to the world to come. So an individual, another Jew who misleads him, it's one of the most serious offenses, one of the most serious avonot that there can be. How can you forgive him for doing something like that? So therefore, we can now understand a little bit of why this holiday is so important and what was at stake. We're talking about the Jewish neshama, in danger of being contaminated by Greek philosophy. Hanukkah is therefore a battle for the Jewish neshama. Purim was more of a battle of physical survival. Haman wanted to destroy us. He wanted to kill us. That's what the Germans tried to do. That's what Amalek tries to do. Even though Amalek's philosophy is also to get rid of everything that is Jewish, even the Torah. But his strategy, his way of doing it is physically killing. That is why, by the way, we have a mitzvah to do the same to him. Timched zecher Amalek. Don't give him a chance. Destroy him. Get him before he gets to you. He's a danger to you. He does not like what you do. He's against everything you believe in. So, the two of you cannot live together. So therefore, eliminate him before he eliminates you. It's a constant battle. Here we have the Yevanim. We have the Greeks who are interested in controlling Eretz Israel, controlling all the lands in the area in a different way, not by subjugating, physically making slaves of everyone, but by enlightening them, I guess you can use that word, with their philosophy and their culture. Now you can appreciate a little bit why the rabbis so much insisted and so much emphasized repeatedly the importance of learning Torah. It's not only a mitzvah, it's not only an obligation of sorts, because we need to be knowledgeable of our laws, so we know how to behave and what to do. But it's more than that. The Torah really is the only protection a Jew has against assimilating the views of other cultures or other civilizations. The rabbis put it in stronger terms. They say it's not just a protection against assimilation, it's a basic protection that will immunize you against the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. It is the only thing out there that magen u'matzil, that will protect you from all sorts of terrible events and catastrophes, of yisurim, of pain and suffering, u'matzil, that will save you or protect you from sins. Learning Torah, therefore, has tremendous weight, tremendous value, tremendous cost, tremendous strength. A Jew, therefore, cannot go without Torah. The importance of Kvi'at Itima Torah, setting aside time for Torah, even if it's 5-10 minutes, is very important. That is how a Jew recharges his spiritual batteries. That is how he can survive spiritually. Without the Torah, as we will soon see, he exposes himself to many, many dangers out there. And I assure you, and I want to guarantee it, and I want to say it in the strongest terms possible, there is no way in the world that a Jew can survive spiritually, and definitely not his children if he's not surviving, unless he's attached to the Torah, unless he learns the Torah. The Torah is I guess you can call it like a flashlight. It shows us the way. It illuminates the road. That is why the Torah is compared to light. Iner mitzvah, the Torah Ohr. It illuminates the way. It shows us what to do, what not to do, what our priorities should be in life, what we should emphasize, what not emphasize. Without the Torah, it's like traveling in a foreign land without a GPS. Right? Is everybody familiar with the GPS? How are you going to go? How are you going to know to get to your destination without a good map? But that is on the most simplistic level. That the Torah is a map road, or roadmap, I should say, of how to get where we need to get. But there's much more than that. It is actually the source of our strength, and it is the secret of our survival. The Torah, therefore, protects us, is the only one that can protect us physically and spiritually, both. I like to tell over all the time what Mark Twain, who's not Jewish, who was a non-Jew, said when he visited Israel I think in the late 1890s, when Israel was a very barren land, not too many Jews, not too many people. And he observed what was going on, and he, in his poetic way, described how you can see how the land is mourning for its people, how there's nobody there, how everybody's gone and disappeared. Nonetheless, he turns to the Jewish people and he says to himself, but one thing I don't understand, what is it with the Jew? He saw everyone. He saw the Persians, he saw the Greeks, he saw the Romans. He beat them all. They are gone from the scene, and he's still around. Despite persecutions, despite all the troubles that they've had, despite all the problems that they've had year after year, generation after generation, that they had to face all these enemies, he's the only one that's still around. He's the only one that's immortal. What is the secret of his survival, of his immortality? That is Mark Twain's question. He remains with the question mark. He does not answer his questions. He doesn't understand what's the secret behind the Jews' immortality. We know the answer to that. What's the answer to that? Well, let's turn to another Midrash. The Midrash says that there was once a Roman that asked a Tanakh, tell me, you Jews have been around forever, you've been able to survive regardless of the decrees against you and the pressure that you've had to face. It must be that even though you are one sheep among 70 wolves, you must be a very powerful sheep indeed. So he says, no, you got it all wrong. It's not the strength of the sheep, it's the strength of the shepherd. It's the protection that is offered to us by the shepherd. And obviously that protection is also offered to us by the Torah that comes from the shepherd. So basically our whole life depends on this, and that is the meaning of the pasuk. Kihem hayenu ve'orech yamenu. Very simple. The length of our life, our survival, depends only on the Torah. If we watch over the Torah, she will watch over us. Now what happens to a Jew who does not learn Torah? A Jew who does not learn Torah, he immediately, automatically absorbs the terrible influences outside of the street. There are some terrible elements, negative elements, that are very dangerous to the Jewish soul. Always, constantly out there, but especially these days, there's so much tumah, so much impurity. And a human being does not live in a vacuum. Something has to be absorbed. You go out there and you absorb something, and if there's nothing in you already from Torah, you're going to absorb whatever is out there. That is how powerful society is. That is how powerful the environment is. You don't live in a vacuum. You absorb. Most people cannot resist the pressures outside unless they have something else that's keeping them strong and proud and unwilling, of course, to take anything else. To resist something else, you have to believe in something different. Otherwise, man does not live in the vacuum. Yeah. And the reason why human beings are always absorbing in this society that we live in the environment that we're in, is because there is always a constant battle, remember, between the Kedusha and the Tumah. Always a battle. We spoke about that when we talked about the powers or the impure forces, the Koach HaTumah, why Hashem created the Tumah. It appears to be, and it is in a sense, a competing force. There is a competing force out there with the Kedusha. There's constant battle between two. Each one wants you to be his fan or his victim, however you want to look at it. Obviously, we're not victims of the Kedusha, but either we espouse the Kedusha, we become members of it, we adapt it into our life, or we run the risk of absorbing Tumah, or becoming part of that. One of the two is going to happen. Why? Because there's always that competition. And in any environment that you're in any society, there's always going to be something. Different philosophies, different cultures competing against each other. Unless maybe when people lived in communist Russia and they totally tried to seal off the land from anything. And people were brainwashed only with communism. But otherwise, in any open society, in a democracy especially, you have unfortunately Jews that believe almost in anything. And I don't want to even mention the names of those cults that exist out there. The Jews, our own brothers and sisters, have joined because they're out there in this free country selling their beliefs. And there are buyers. Could you believe it that there are buyers for just about anything? You make something, make anything you want. Invent something, somebody will buy it. There's a buyer for everything. So what is happening now during the Second Temple era? Unfortunately, the Jewish people slowly began to become contaminated. Their views, their hashkafot, the way they see things, began to become contaminated by the Greeks, by the philosophy of the Greeks. And if God forbid things would be allowed to go on this way, what would happen? The Jewish people will become more and more distant from the Torah, will let go of the Torah, let go of their observance of mitzvot. No more Jewish nation. That is the beginning of assimilation, right? When you stop keeping mitzvot, you start adopting the ways of the goyim, of the non-Jew. So what does God do? You think He's interested in this going on for too long? No way. You cannot allow a problem to go on for too long. If there's a medical problem, Chaz v'shalom, you take care of it. Otherwise, it gets out of hand, it's not controllable, it's maybe not curable. Spiritually, as we said before, it's similar, but it's even worse. We're talking about the neshama here. What does Hashem do? He sends us signals. He always sends us signals that something is wrong with us. Something is wrong with our conduct. Something is wrong with our lack of observance or our lack of faith in Him. And how does He let us know what is wrong so we should be able to figure it out? After all, we can't speak to Him directly. What did we do wrong? He always sends us a message in something that is very similar to what we're doing or not doing. The fact that the Greeks tried to weaken us from Torah, detach us from Torah, why would Hashem allow them to do that? He doesn't want anybody to take us away from the Torah. It's only because we on our own volunteered to detach ourselves from Torah. Oh, Hashem says, you on your own are doing it? How am I going to let you know that that is your problem? That is the problem that we have? I'm going to send the goy to do the same to you. Then you will wonder, well, why? There must be a problem in the observance of Torah. Maybe we're not strong enough. Maybe we're not dedicated enough. And that is why the Greek has this power all of a sudden and the interest to take us away from the Torah. It does not happen by chance. It does not happen on its own. It all happens with Shamayim. Obviously, they are responsible. They are guilty. And they will be punished for the way they treated us. Nonetheless, it's always a message of Shamayim. It's always a sign from heaven that there's something that we're doing wrong. And in this case, in the story of Hanukkah, it was our devotion our commitment, our allegiance to the Torah and mitzvot. Therefore, in celebrating Hanukkah, what we attempt to do in celebrating is for quite a number of days, is partially a tikkun, an atonement for our maasim, for our deed. In other words, here we go out of our way to show that we are dedicated, we are interested, and we light the menorah for 8 days. Why 8? Well, first of all, for those of you who know the custom of Simchat Torah, when we celebrate the finishing of the Torah, with the last reading of the last parashat, V'zot HaBeracha, what do we do after we finish V'zot HaBeracha? We read Parashat Bereshit. There's no stopping. There's no end to the Torah. You immediately continue. We start again with Bereshit. How many days of the week? 7. Every single day of the week has Torah. Every single day of the week has Kedusha. Every day of the week is important. But we're not satisfied with completing the week. As soon as we start the second week, the 8th day is the second week, we continue again. So 8 is one more than 7. In the same way that Bereshit is read after the V'zot HaBeracha. We don't stop. We continuously learn the Torah, never ending. That is just one idea that I thought perhaps would give us a little bit of a sense of why so much emphasis on Hanukkah, why so many days. But as I've mentioned in the past, the number 8 is also very special. What does 8 remind us? The Brit Milah, the circumcision. The circumcision occurs on the 8th day. Hanukkah is a time that we show our commitment to Hashem in the same way that a child is circumcised and then at that point becomes committed to Hashem, committed to the mitzvot of Hashem, being a part, a member of the Jewish nation. That is the Brit Milah, right? The circumcision. L'achniso v'brito shel Avraham Avinu. That is the Brit. Hanukkah is like a Brit also. 8 days, like the Brit Milah, that we commit ourselves, or we recommit ourselves and rededicate ourselves to the service of Hashem. That is another idea. Number 8 is also a spiritual number. 6 represents this world. There's 6 corners to this world. As you see in Sukkot, when we move the lulav in all 6 corners, right? North, east, south, west, up and down, like a Magen David, 6 corners. That's Olam Hazeh. 7 represents Olam Haba. 7 is not the physical world so much, it's Olam Haba. And in Olam Haba, of course, there's rest. There's no physical labor. Just like Shabbat. So Shabbat is Me'ein Olam Haba. It's like Olam Haba. It's supposed to remind us what Olam Haba is. And if people really observe Shabbat properly, they will experience really a sense of Olam Haba, of the world to come. Very special number. Number 7 is a holy number. We find a lot of sets in the Torah or concepts that involve 7. A lot of them, right? The Sheva Berachot, or Chatan Mechala, the 7 days of mourning, right? The 7 days of the holiday of Pesach and Shavuot and Sukkot, right? A lot of concepts in the Torah that contain 7. 7 days of Enidah, woman being unclean. Many concepts that involve the number 7 because 7 represents Kedusha. It's no longer part of this world. But 8 is already something completely spiritual, not of this world at all. It represents another dimension that we will have when Mashiach comes. And you should have told us something else about 7. What else is there 7 that only you know? How about the music? What do you have in music at 7?
Well, 7 note names.
7 notes.
But they're actually 12.
Well, I don't know if you include everything else, but there are actually 7. And when Mashiach comes, Lamnatzeach ala Sheminit. Right? The Hillel, you find the concept that there will be an 8th. And they have here. Right, but we cannot hear it now.
8 strings.
Yeah. 8 strings. That's correct, yeah.
Well, that everybody else will go to 10, right?
Yeah. So number 8 is representative of the neshama, not this world, not even the world to come in a sense. It's completely representative of the neshama, which is a totally different entity. How about the oil? The emphasis of the oil. Oil in itself gives, of course, when you light it with a wick, it gives us light. That is the light of the Torah. So the significance of lighting the menorah is to remind us of the importance of the Torah, which is what the Hashmonaim fought for. They did not fight to liberate themselves from the Greek yoke. The Greeks continued to rule Israel. They did not seek, the Hashmonaim did not seek independence. All they sought was the restoration of the service of the Beit HaMikdash, to be able to fulfill the mitzvot. The lighting of the menorah, using the oil, represents that Torah, which is what they sought to restore. The pure oil that is so important in Hanukkah represents the pure thoughts, clean of any Greek contamination, pure Jewish thoughts, pure Jewish ideas. And, of course, the famous comparison or the famous example of oil floating on water. Oil floating on water represents what? The Jewish nation being on top. The Jewish nation cannot assimilate, cannot intermarry with the rest of the world. We have to be on top. Oil does not mix with water. We'll stay on top. We need to remember that. That if we want to survive spiritually and physically too, we have to be careful from assimilation. Just like the oil floats in water, the Jews, in order for them to survive, they have to stay on top and not mixed with the rest of the world. This is a big problem and has been around in every generation. Even though we've heard the statistics are terrible and very sad in the 20th and 21st century about the percentage of Jews intermarrying, there's always been a little bit of a problem, because remember, assimilation as opposed to intermarriage is also a form of intermarriage. In other words, what is assimilation? That you learn the ways of the Goyim. You become like them. Intermarrying just means you took it one step further. You've married them. You become like one of them. But they're very similar. And this problem has always existed in various degrees. So what are we going to do about it? How do we prevent it? How do we communicate to our children the grave danger of assimilation? We do so by very interesting minhag. Hanukkah, more than any other holiday, besides the number of days, besides being a long holiday, there is also many things that we are mehader. You will find this concept in Hanukkah. La mehadrim, mehadrim min mehadrim. To do everything perfect, to do everything in the best way possible. We don't just light one minimal candle a night, which is, by the way, the minimum. The minimum, if you don't have that much money, if you're on some trip, just light one candle every night. Even on the 7th night, on the 8th night, if you lit one, you still fulfill the mitzvah, because that's the bare minimum. Then why doesn't everybody do the bare minimum? So we all do mehadrim na mehadrim, we all do the best. The best of Hanukkah. Why? Because when it comes to rededicating the temple, when it comes to educating our children, when it comes to preserving our identity, we don't compromise. We don't do minimum. We do the best. Jewish education is expensive. Yes, it's not like a public school where you get almost everything for free. Jewish education costs money, but it's worth it. It's the best investment you'll ever make in your children. If you gave them a Jewish education, you sent them to a Jewish school, you imbued them with Torah. That's the best investment you'll ever make in your life. Therefore, in Hanukkah, there are no compromises. That's why no Jew, unless he's poor, unless he has no choice, does not do the minimum. He does it the best. Not only does he do it the best, what else do we do when we light the Hanukkah, Hanukkah, the menorah? We do something very interesting, and that is in halakha. That is part of the mitzvah. We publicize it. We put it by our window. We want everybody to see it, not just ourselves, but everybody else too. Why is it so important to publicize it? Anybody know why it's important to publicize the miracle of Hanukkah more than any other holiday? We don't publicize everything. We eat the seder, the Haggadah, we say by ourselves in our living room. What is that?
Something else.
Yeah, but why this more than anything else? The Hanukkah, yeah, everybody has to be aware of it. Everybody has to see the light. We do it at a certain time of the night. There is a halakha that says you cannot put it too high. If you live in Manhattan, well, nobody going down the street at 6 p.m. will be able to see you lighting on the 50th floor. It's a problem. You can't really light so high, above 20 amot, as the halakha says, which is between 38 and 40 feet. You have to light it downstairs, facing the street, in the hallway perhaps, where people can see it. Not only where you could see it, but where people could see it. So there are certain rules as to the height of how high the menorah should be, but it should not be too low on the ground either. Why so much importance as to the height of the menorah? So people can see it. Why should people see it? Well, what happens if you do something, you light the menorah, nobody can really see it. Neither you could see it, or the people in the street see it. What happens when people do not see something, they just do it, then they don't relate to it. If you want to relate to something, then you want to be able to see it. You want to have it in front of you. You want other people to relate to it, then you want them to see it. Oh, wow, yeah, it's Hanukkah. Look at the lights. Look, everyone lighted. Everyone lit. In order for people to relate to something, they need to see it. If somebody does not see, he will not relate. If he does not relate, he will not appreciate it. If he does not appreciate it, he will stop doing it. That is how assimilation begins. That is how people stop observing. They stop relating to it. It's not important anymore in their eyes. Because Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, as the Pasuk says, because the candle of Hashem is the soul, we have to relate to this. We have to remind ourselves, who are we really? The essence of the human being is his soul, not his physical body that clothes the soul. You dispose of that when you die. It rots in the ground. Even the bones eventually disintegrate after a number of years. Nothing is left except for the neshama. And that neshama needs to be nurtured. In that neshama one needs to invest. That is what illuminates his way. That is what shows him the way, if you allow it. The physical body is always doing battle with that neshama, and the physical body has its cravings and its interests, and therefore it does not always allow the neshama to lead, to show the way. But a Jew who is surrounded by Torah, of course, has a better chance that the neshama will be the leader, and not the physical body that is so predisposed to doing the wrong things, not the right things, because it has cravings, it has bias, it has interests that are not always compatible with the Kedusha, with holiness, with the will of Hashem. So therefore, we emphasize it, we publicize it, and we share that message with the entire family. Everybody should be present at the event. All the kids, the women. This is not just a men's club. Hanukkah belongs to everyone. Everyone is involved. This message is for everyone. Another idea, of course, of why we publicize the miracle is to oppose the Greeks in one of their philosophies. One of the most dangerous philosophies that they believed in, and that they tried to sell to us, was that man is central to everything. That is why they built gymnasiums. You see monuments of Greeks, see their muscles. Everything with their physical body. Man is central to everything. There is no God, Chas v'shalom. Man is responsible for everything. And we emphasize just the opposite. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashgiach, He's the one that directs everything. He's the one that supervises the world. He did not only create the world, He's still around. He doesn't appear to us that He's around, but we know, we believe it. We know that He runs the show. So when we rededicate ourselves to the service of Hashem by lighting the menorah, we also remind ourselves, and everyone else, when we publicize it, that he's in charge. He's the one that made these miracles happen. What do you mean he made the miracles happen? Those Hashmonaim guys, they must have been strong fellows. No. The few defeated the many? Well, that's what the Israeli Air Force said after the 6-Day War. It must be the Israeli pilots. After all, how do you explain winning a war in 6 days? What a shame that many had that reaction and attitude, because that is why we suffered in the Yom Kippur War. The lesson should have been, this was a nes, it was a miracle. If the few can defeat the many, even the non-Jewish world admitted that that must be an act of God. And that is why in the Nes Hashemim, in the miracle of oil, we put so much emphasis, because in the same way that one little bit of oil cannot last 8 days, the little cannot last long, neither did the few defeat on their own the many. If the little oil can last a long time, it's because it was a miracle by Hashem. So was the act of defeat of the few defeating the many an act or a miracle by Hashem, not by human beings. So we publicize this, we remind ourselves and everyone else that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that is responsible for the miracles that happen. I want to add to this another little point that I think is interesting. We've talked about it in the past, that one of the greatest and saddest times in Jewish history is when there is hastarat panim, or hester panim, when Hashem hides his face. When it appears to us, we think that he's not around, like the Holocaust. He's hiding, and we know he's around, but he's hiding because he's not doing anything about it, apparently. We would like him to reveal himself. And that is one of the prayers that we say in the Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuati, Chasof Zeroa Kodshecha. The last one. Hashem, please reveal your arm. Please reveal yourself again like you did in Egypt. Hashem hides himself. That's terrible, because many people think he's not around. When we publicize his miracles, Hashem says, you reveal me, then I will reveal myself. So I believe very, very much that this is an additional idea, a very important idea, that the publicizing, the Pirsum HaNes of Hanukkah in itself represents our prayer of Hashem, we're going to publicize you. We're going to reveal you because we want you to reveal yourself to us. So we've answered 2 of the 3 questions. We've answered the question, why is Hanukkah celebrated so many days more than any other holiday? We've answered the question, why so much emphasis in oil? Now we're going to turn to the 3rd question. Very important question. Why is it that only kometz shel anashim, only a few people, compared to the millions of Jews who were there living in Israel, only a few rebelled against the Greeks, only a few decided to do battle with the Greeks? What happened to everybody else? Did they believe that this was a just cause, worth taking a chance, especially if Hashem will protect you? Everybody else, apparently, what did they do? They were trying to hide their identity. They were not necessarily as proud of being Jewish as the Hashmonaim. What did we say before? When you are proud, when you already have something that you believe in, then you don't invite something else. Everything else stays out. If one is empty, if his head is empty of anything, of Torah, of mitzvot, then there is room to fill that head with other ideas. Those who were furthest away from the Torah, their heads were empty and more susceptible to absorbing the Greek influence. And what happens when you, little by little, get closer and closer to the non-Jew, you become like them. Right? Do you think that somebody who's becoming like the non-Jew, absorbing his ideas, will have the courage or the interest of fighting him? Why should I fight him for? On the contrary, I don't want to make him feel bad. I want to appease him. I don't want to stand out like a sore thumb. I don't want to be different than him. I want him to like me. You understand? And that is exactly what happened when Am came down to Mitzrayim. Rabbis tell us in Midrash Rabbah something incredible. Then after the Shebatim passed away, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, all of the tribes, the head of the tribes, that generation stopped circumcising their children. Why? They didn't want to be too different than the Egyptians. They didn't want to be second-class citizens. They didn't want to anger the Egyptians. They wanted to be just like the rest of them. Even though I need to, of course, say to their credit what the rabbis say, that in the end, of course, Am Yisrael was very strong. They did not change their name, their language, their clothing. Nonetheless, at least in the very beginning, they stopped circumcising their children because they wanted, we saw hand, as the Midrash says, they wanted to find favor in the eyes of the Egyptian. What does Hashem do? The opposite. You think they're going to like you? Hashem changed their heart of the Egyptian. Instead of liking the Jews, now they hate them even more. Just like the Germans did to the Jews. You think you can run away from your Judaism? I'm going to dig up your great-great-great-grandfather who was Jewish, even though in the last 6 generations you've become a Christian. They went out against us. Not everybody learns this. Not everybody gets the point, but that is exactly what has happened throughout history. This is a psychological problem that people have, that they want to be nice to everyone, they don't want to stand out and be too different. And the reason why people have this psychological problem is only because they lack self-esteem. That's all it is. One rabbi once said that the greatest sin a Jew can commit is to forget Shehu ben Melech, that he's the son of a king. The greatest sin, the greatest avon, the greatest injustice, the most terrible thing a Jew can do to himself is to forget who he is, what his responsibility is in this world. Could you imagine going over to a train track and removing one piece of the track? Could you say, well, what is the big deal of removing one? The train can still go through? Huh? What's going to happen to that train? It's going to derail. Just remove one. But then you just think, oh, what's the big deal if I stop keeping this one mitzvah? What's the big deal if I'm not so Jewish, but the rest of Am Yisrael is Jewish? The problem is everybody's going to think that way too. And that's the problem. Everybody's going to think that way. A Jew needs to feel that he has great responsibility. Hu ben Melech, he's the son of a king. He has a mission. Everyone is needed. If one is missing, if one is gone, it's terrible. We suffer. Lack of self-esteem, lack of Jewish pride, and that all stems from what? We go back to the original point. Without learning Torah, that is what happens. The Jew does not learn Torah. How is he supposed to remember who he is? How is he supposed to know what his mission is? And if he does not know what his mission is, he does not know who he is, then why shouldn't he not marry a non-Jewish girl? They're cute, they're nice. What's wrong with a girl from Sweden? You know, they're very nice people, decent human beings. And they have blue eyes, for those who like those colors. What's wrong with that? You know, how are you going to convince somebody, how are you going to dissuade him from marrying a nice young girl or a nice young man? Just because he's from Finland, and from Denmark, and he's not Jewish, so what? Then you have the smart Alex. You can always convert them. How should they know? They don't have a love for the Torah and for their Judaism. Then therefore that love is going to be much more powerful than anything else. If somebody's in love, I don't know how many of you are married here, I don't know how many of you have very close friends, but you know what the power of love is? It's incredible. It's very, very powerful. Powerful stuff. Anybody who experiences knows what I'm talking about. It's something that is very difficult to get it out of your life. Once you have it, hopefully it's there forever. How are you going to tell somebody who's in love with the wrong person, with a non-Jewish person, I should say, that this is not for you? The only way to convince them, and this is a separate lecture, B'ezrat Hashem, is if the Torah is more powerful in their life, has greater stature, more importance, them than anything else in the world. Nothing matters as much as the Torah. If that's the case, then he would not, or she would not marry a non-Jew. Because they know what it means. But if they don't know what it means, then what do you expect of them? How are you going to convince them? It's very difficult. A lack of self-esteem, a low self-esteem, a lack of Jewish pride, therefore no courage to fight against the enemy. We're pretty much the same. So what? They speak Greek? So let's speak another language. You know, what's the big deal? But if one would learn Torah, then one would have the pride, one would know what his mission is, he would have a little bit of respect and feel the responsibility of who he is and what he represents. That is why not everybody had the courage. Well, why did the Hashmonaim have the courage? What made them different? Well, let's go back to Mitzrayim. Remember what I just said in Egypt? What happened in Egypt? They stopped circumcising themselves? Not everyone. Shevet Levi continued to circumcise their kids. Because Shevet Levi continued to circumcise their kids, you think the Egyptians hated them? No. On the contrary, they told Shevet Levi, you're not slaves. You don't have to work. We won't ask you to volunteer to make the pyramids. Don't worry. You can sit back and do whatever it is you want. Exactly the opposite. Here we're thinking they're going to hate them because they stand out. No. They like them. They respected them. Shevet Levi and Mitzrayim continued to circumcise their children. They were not afraid. They did not want to find favor in the eyes of the Egyptian. And therefore, they remained steadfast, and therefore they were not subjected to the slavery, to the bondage. Same thing with the Hashmonaim. After all, they're Kohanim, Shevet Levi. They did not give in. They did not assimilate. They knew what their mission is. It was very sensitive to them because they were Kohanim. This is the Bet HaMikdash. This is something very important to them. And therefore, they were very, very devoted to the Torah, and therefore had the strength, the courage to fight for what they believe in. Very, very simple. But not everyone. It shows how much many Jews at that time were becoming more and more assimilated. And that is why Hashem had to get himself involved and had to put a stop to it. He came up with this decree. I'm going to stop this assimilation with decrees. And that is going to get the message across that somebody's going to hopefully do something about it. A Jew needs to remember that his responsibility is to transmit to future generations the lapid ha'esh, the torch of fire. One generation to another, and the Chaz v'Shalom, if he does not do it, there may be an interruption. If every Jew would feel alive with the same responsibility, we would not have the problem of assimilation. All of what we've just said is very nice and important. The emphasis that we put in the Hanukkah, the message that it sends, the rededicating ourselves to the mitzvot, but all of that is not enough if we don't thank Hashem for all that He has done for us. A very important integral part of our service to Hashem, service meaning prayer. A very important integral part of our service involves Hodaya. The Amidah, the Shmonesre, portion of it has praises to Hashem, a portion has requests, and a portion has giving thanks to Hashem. Giving thanks to Hashem we do from the moment we get up in the morning when we say Modeh Ani Lefaneh. Giving thanks to Hashem is extremely important. Because by giving thanks to Him, we basically remind ourselves and everyone else who hears us that He's responsible for all the miracles. He's the source of everything. We owe everything to Him. And you know why this is so important? Because everything begins with this important midah that's called appreciation. Appreciation, being grateful. What happens if a person is ungrateful? Well, let's take a look at one such individual. Paro. All of a sudden we have a new king in Egypt that does not know Yosef. All the good that Yosef did. Rabbi tells us it's the same king. Some say it's a different king. Fine. But according to the opinion that says it's the same king, what happened? He stopped knowing Yosef. All the good that Yosef did for the Egyptians, he stopped knowing, he stopped recognizing. Yes. He was ungrateful. He ignored it. And when a person ignores the favor and the kindness of another human being, he eventually will come to ignore the favors of Hashem.
this same Paro who ignored what Yosef did, is that ungratefulness is what led him to say, Mi Hashem, who is this Hashem that you're talking about? When one is ungrateful to another human being, he eventually is ungrateful to Hashem. When one does not recognize all the kindness, all the goodness that others have done for him, that is very, very dangerous, because at some point, he will not recognize all the good that Hashem has done for him. In Hanukkah, therefore, there's also the emphasis of Hallel, the Hodaya, giving thanks to Hashem. By saying the Hallel, by saying the blessings. Kadosh Baruch Hu is responsible for these miracles. Very important midah, very important habit that we need to get used to is to recognizing anything that was done good for us, because that will help us recognize the good that Hashem does for us too. I'd like to end with the biggest miracle of all. Anybody know what the biggest miracle of Hanukkah is? We spoke a little bit about how the Hashmonaim were able to defeat the Greeks.
It was
Spoke about the other
the
miracle.
order of the Kohen Gadol, Yehudas, who were, is you talking about that miracle?
No, there's all sorts of miracles, right? There's the miracle of the oil lasting all these things. There's a lot of miracles. Hanukkah. But I thought of one of the biggest miracles, if not the biggest miracle. One of the biggest miracles, perhaps the biggest miracle of Hanukkah, is that despite all the assimilation, there were a number of Jews who did not assimilate. The fact that some did not is also a miracle. You know why it's such a big miracle? It is because of that miracle that all the rest of the miracles were performed. It is because they gave themselves, b'msirut nefesh, with self-sacrifice, for Am Yisrael. It's because of their self-sacrifice that Hashem did all the rest of the miracles. All the other miracles that we are celebrating now, during these days, Hanukkah, is because of that miracle. In other words, that a number of Jews, a group of people, did not give in. I call it a miracle because in the face of an overwhelming majority that is doing nothing, people could say, well, why should I be the one to do something? That is very, very normal and natural for people to react that way. The biggest rabbis are not saying anything. Nobody's protesting. Nobody's demonstrating. Where are all the placards? Nobody's doing anything. So why should I do something? So it took a lot of guts, a lot of courage by the Hashmonaim. It was a big miracle. The big Kiddush Hashem, the fact that the number of Jews got up and stood for what they believe in. And I have a feeling, this is just my own personal opinion, I don't know if it's true, I don't know if it's close to the truth. But isn't it interesting that this beautiful holiday, the great devotion the Jews demonstrated, had such a great impact on us that it also somehow impacted the non-Jewish world. After all, they have their own holiday of lights. Lights. I'm not going to talk about other things that they do, because that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Everything else we do has nothing to do with what we do. But lights, they have lights decorating during this holiday. And they don't emphasize the lights so much. They emphasize other shtuyot. Let's call it that. Nonsense. Things that they believe in that has its origins, by the way, in paganism. And I don't need to explain because I think you know what I'm talking about. And isn't it interesting that it coincides more or less always at the same time as our holiday does? Why? Nothing just happens for nothing, by chance. You look at historically, and I'm not the only one to say that there is no coincidence here. Others have seen it and have even shown the connection between the two. But what I wanted to add is the fact of the lights. Our light was so powerful that it impacted the Goyim too. And that is, of course, our wish, that B'ezrat Hashem, that light that we light today will send a powerful message to all of our Jewish brothers and sisters to recommit themselves to Torah and Mitzvot. And in this way, we will have the merit of seeing very soon the light of the Mashiach, including all the many, many miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will perform for us. Open miracles. B'ezrat Hashem, Amen.